All right, so welcome to the part two of classroom management. And again, if you go back and look at part one, because I'm picking up at a particular point of saying that classroom management is not about compliance. It's about building a community where you build leaders. And it is not about rules because I believe relationships are greater than someone just following the rules. So, in this episode, what I'm going to do is talk about mission. I'm going to talk about vision, mission, and core values, and we're going to look at how it looks from a educator perspective. Because a lot of times we hear those terms, we think about a business, and yeah. So let's break this down. So let's go. Let's start it out. So, um, the whole idea of community came to me late in my career as an educator. I was one that, hey, was a math educator that said you need to sit in your seat and let me be the sage on the stage, listen, write the notes down. And if you have questions about what I'm talking about, um, then raise your hand. Well, I have changed. And again, I will shout out the class of 2013, 2012, 2014 for changing. And that's the Coffeeville High School state champions, um, B rated school. That's who I'm talking about, that Coffeeville High School. Don't get it confused. Not in Kansas or in Alabama. I think there might be a school. But anyway, let me get back to the subject at hand. Um, vision. When we think about vision, vision is a big picture dream, okay? It's a big picture dream for your classroom. And an example of that, or a question you should ask yourself is, what kind of learning environment do I want to create? I think that's a question you definitely have to ask yourself. Because what happens is we sometimes think about, like for me, I thought about my previous high school experiences, my middle school experiences, and I wanted to build my classroom around that aspect. And let me pause and add this: I have a pure math degree, and I decided that hey, I'm going to use this math degree in school. So I began to teach, but I had no educational background. I later went to get that information and I just you hold on to it, but then I later began to develop my own style. Now, when we talk about this whole idea of a mission or a vision, it's not just about academics, right? If you just focus in on academics, you you're gonna find out that children need more. They need more than you just giving them the correct answer or some process on how to do something. They need to feel, interact, and engage in the classroom. So when we think about the vision, you got to think about what does that look like for you. Now, how does this different than a business vision? Now, when we think about business is thinking about the future, right? Where they want to be turned into or where they're going. But when we think about it from a school's perspective, it is the experience you want your children to have every day. That's the classroom that you want to when you think about vision. That what classroom are you building that they're going to interact in on a daily basis? So don't get those two confused and don't be thrown off by the whole idea of vision because you need to have a picture of what that looks like. What does your classroom look like? How are they going to interact on a daily basis? So, some examples of that is just our classroom is a space. So I'm gonna give you an example. Here's an example. Our classroom is a space where all students feel valued, challenged, empowered to take ownership of their learning. Well, I'm not going to break this down in this video, but it does not limit one um, person in your classroom. It doesn't one component of your classroom. You're not limiting them. It is embracing all that's in there. So that's how we get the all to move forward. It's just having a vision that wraps around all of those people. Another example is we're a learning community that values curiosity, respect, growth, where students are active participants and not passive learners. So again, you can give the vision out, but it has to be unfolded and communicated in a way that they understand it. And having that shared vision is important. So, you know, how do you develop a vision? Right. So it's not something you sit down, or it's something that comes down a beam of light. Oh, that's not the situation, right? So you ask yourself, if my students come back, so how do you develop your vision? Here's some questions and some little guidance on this. When you think about it, ask yourself, if my students look back on this year, how would I want them to remember? What would I want them to remember about this class? So, what you want to do is write down one or two sentences that defines that kind of environment that you want to build. And again, you're not doing a dissertation. You're not doing this full out thesis statement. You want to keep it simple, meaningful, and student centered. Got me? All right, cool. Let's jump to our next part. We're going to talk about mission. What is mission? Mission is an actionable plan for achieving your vision. It answers the questions. All right, and the questions that we're going to look at is what daily habits, teaching strategies, and expectations will guide your classroom culture. Okay, so I get it. You're probably saying, it sounds like what my principal is doing. Yeah, you're just doing it on a much smaller scale. And as you scale up in your job roles, that's basically what you're really looking at, because you are learning how to manage yourself, or learning how to lead yourself, learning how to lead students. Then you get into the administrator role. You learn how to lead another layer, which is going to be adults, but you're still leading yourself along with students, and you include parents in that. And then as you get into the district roles, the superintendent, you are at the top of the or the organization, or the org, and you are leading a lot of people. So yeah, let me come on back. I'm kind of diving into something else. So the mission is a more practical than the vision. It is focused on the how. That's the mission. So some examples of that, of how it differs from the business standpoint. The business mission, it outlines products, services, and operations. And you kind of get into that in a sense when you talk about the classroom, but the classroom mission outlines teaching approaches, student expectations, and learning principles. And all of that is not something that you just put on the board or have in your instructional binder. This is something that the children know. And I would even go to say that it has to be communicated to the parents in such a way that they know that, so that you can have all these stakeholders in, and so that you can move forward, not by yourself. You're not trying to take this on by yourself. Now, some examples of a mission statement, and you're not limited to it, is in our classroom, we will foster a growth mindset, encourage curiosity, ensure that every student feels heard and respected. So yeah, that's a lot right there, and we have to, I don't have time on this video, but we will literally have to go through each component of that to make sure, um, and what that looks like, what that sounds like, so that when you're having your interactions in the classroom, the students will understand that the responsibilities, and not just, how here it rules. This is something that we are governed within ourselves. Another one would be, we will support one another through collaboration, challenge ourselves to think critically, and take ownership of our learning journey. I like that one because it is now shifting to this whole collaborative piece, this when we talk about collaboration, it's not on one person's shoulder. It's we're taking on this task collectively. And I know what you're saying. They're going to take the test by themselves. Well, yeah, they are. They're still going to take assessments by themselves. But what you do is you empower them to think differently. You shift the mindset. And when they do have that assessment, they have the confidence to take it on. So again, I'm gonna move forward because I want to dive deeper into these topics. But what I'll do is I'll go and I'll break these down in another video. Next, how do you develop a mission? Think about your teaching approach. What method will you use to reach your vision? Another thing is involving students in crafting a classroom mission statement so they take ownership of the culture. Later in my teaching career, I did this. And I thought it was one of the craziest things in the world. But oh my goodness, when I tell you it was most effective and efficient, because what started to happen was that they bought into this whole idea that this is a classroom, and what they started to do was leaders started to step up, and a lot of the behaviors that I didn't have the right students up for, because they knew that was the expectation. And if someone was not uh, upholding to that, you had another person in the classroom that would step up and just say, "Hey, man, chill out, man. We ain't trying to do that today." And when they hear that from their peers instead of from the adult all the time, it becomes more piercing than, okay, you go write them up, they go to the office and get whatever response they were supposed to get. It's an accountability measure that I think is helpful, because a lot of times they don't know what accountability is. And when it comes, it seems so foreign that there's a rebellion against it. Now, again, guys, I'm not saying that this is just a circus. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you are running a well-oiled machine within your classroom. And it's not just based on the rules we have on on the wall, but it's the students buying in to their future. So again, when you're writing this vision, you want to keep it simple. If I can't emphasize that enough, keep it simple, actionable, that will guide you and the students on a daily basis. So it's not that you're just building it for them, you're building it for yourself as well. So you want to make sure that you're involved in that. And this is going to be our last one. I'm going to cut this video after these statements right here. The next part is going to be core values. What principles are you guiding the behavior in your classroom? Core values are not things that are in your head, but they're things that are in your heart, that they are embodying. So core values are basically your non-negotiables, principles that you're going to have in the classroom. Now, these non-negotiable principles help shape behavior and decision making, because we need those things, right? So we need those principles, um, and not just rules, so that we're able to govern ourselves. So, a question you can ask yourself is, what do we stand for in this classroom? Do we stand for mediocre work? Do we stand for just poor effort? That's a question you have to ask, and that has to be established, modeled, and labeled for the students. So, unlike rules, core values are not about control. They're about building a shared understanding, okay? Shared, meaning that you have a responsibility like I do, and what matters most in the learning environment. You see that in the business world. I hope that you see that in your school, where what's best for the, works best for the students to have a outcome. Now, how does this differ from businesses? Businesses use core values to define their company's culture and decision making. But when you talk about classroom core values, it's how the student and teacher interacts, communicates, and supports one another. Because, you both need support. And that's how we can approach it. Now, example of core values could be uh, respect. Respect is just how we treat each other, how we acknowledge it, how we acknowledge our different perspectives. Okay, that has to be one of the things you have a conversation around. Also, responsibility. We take ownership. They should not be leaving the classroom with paper everywhere. One thing that I did do, and I'm gonna make a whole video on that, is job responsibilities. And that is, oh my goodness, that changed the game for me because then you give them those responsibilities and they're excited to have those responsibilities. Like the UPS person, that's the person that passes out the papers or the materials that we need for the assignment for the day, whatever. Like, oh my goodness, get them to sign up for it, and the jobs change weekly. And then what I added to that was I added this whole idea of there was a manager that was over that, and they could fire people because they wouldn't do it. Oh gosh, like you thought that and they did it, and I didn't have to pay them. Like it was crazy. But I'm gonna talk more about that. But that's just examples of perseverance. Understanding that our core values is even when we talk about from for me mathematics. One of the mathematical practices, and one is we talk about persevering and solving it. Make sense of the problem. That's mathematical practice number one. Make sense of the problem and persevere in solving it. That has to be a core value so that when they're taking assessments or whatever work they're doing, they know that I got to continue to push for. I gotta keep going. It's not okay. And I'm not just letting myself down, but I'm letting my team down, my community down. And collaboration. That's another aspect that has to be taught. It's not something that happens, and it's not something that just it's on paper. All right. All right. So again, let me wrap this up. I'm out. It is 12 minutes, 13 minutes. I didn't mean to stay on that long, but it's all to the good. So let's kind of wrap this up. Bringing your classroom together, classroom that runs on vision, mission, and core values. So again, vision is the big picture. What kind of classroom do you want to build? Mission, it is how you bring to life the vision. And what's your teaching methods, your daily interaction, and your classroom norms. Core values are the guiding principles that help students understand what's expected beyond the rules. Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying you got to have rules. Okay. That's just a part of it, but you got to have some extra layers to it so that they will follow the rules. So instead of just managing through compliance, this approach helps with ownership, leadership, and intrinsic motivation. Okay. And that's definitely important to have. All right. So, guys, listen, let me know in the comments. All right. As you're listening to this video, you know, um, are you just managing your students or are you building a community in which your students are growing in their leadership abilities? And yeah, let me know what your vision is. Maybe you wrote down a mission statement. Drop it in the comments. I like to see what they are. And, hey, maybe we can jump on a Zoom and have a conversation about it and defining it a little better. Like, I would love to hear from you. Again, that is part two of classroom management from the perspective of building a community versus compliant. I am Coach Tony Kimble, your go to for transforming first year teachers. Let's go.